Hey, this is Brain from Advancement Hockey Advising, and today we'll be talking about the best junior A leagues for players to play in who want to play NCAA hockey. Now real quick, before we dive into the video, just a reminder to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and share the video if you like the content. Also, if you want to reach out to us at any time, if you have any questions, whatever, feel free to comment down below or even email us at info@ahadvising.com. The link's going to be in the description below. Last quick thing, this is going to be a bit of a longer video. It's going to be really informative, so feel free to use the timestamps at any time throughout the video. It's probably going to help guide you throughout the whole thing. So without further ado, let's dive into the good stuff here. So basically, why did we make this video? Well, the junior world is very complex, right? There's so many different leagues, so many different teams. I remember when I was playing hockey, me and my parents had no idea which ones were good, bad, and it's very confusing. So it's the biggest reason why we made this video. So what we did is we created a list, top to bottom, which leagues are really good, which ones are at the top, which ones are in the middle, and then kind of which ones are more on the lower side. And we're doing this just to give you guys an idea which leagues to really look out for, which ones to go for, and which ones to kind of avoid. So first quick note here before we dive into our list, these are the junior A leagues that best allow you to go play NCAA hockey as the end goal. That's really important. So with that being said, major junior leagues are out of the equation, right? Because if you play major junior, you can't play NCAA hockey. So since our end goal is to play NCAA hockey, that influences the criteria we'll be using to evaluate the leagues. So basically, we'll be going on two main things. First is the number of relative commits to NCAA per year in a league. So basically what that means is the total number of commits divided by the number of teams in the league. The reason why we do that is it's not fair to say a league like the NAHL, for example, that has a huge number of teams, to compare it to a league like the CCHL that has a smaller number of teams and say, oh, the NAHL has more commits, therefore they're better. You really have to go number of commits divided by the number of teams. And then after, we're going to be using the level of play or the caliber of hockey. That's going to be our second criteria. Now I want to note too that we'll be using other criteria for leagues that are really close in the running. There's a few that were really hard to pick which one goes over the other, a few ties, but we'll be using some minor criteria as well if the other two are really close. Another quick note before we get started, obviously these are general guidelines. If you play in a league that's in third place versus a league that's in fourth place, there's not really much of a difference. The biggest factor too to consider when you're going to play in different leagues is how much ice time you're going to get, how good is the organization you're playing in and stuff like that. So there's more that goes into it than just general league rankings, but the league rankings are really a good place to start. So last quick note before we dive into our list here, prep hockey is probably the best place to go if you want to develop before junior hockey or even to get NCAA D1 commitments. There's a lot of NCAA D1 commitments that go out of prep hockey. So really a good place to look at before juniors or even to look at as a whole. All right, so all that stuff aside, let's dive into our list. So number one on our list here, and it comes as no surprise, is the USHL, right? It's consistently the best league for caliber of play, right? Consistently the league that has the most relative NCAA D1 commits. And it's just a league that, a bunch of really good players flock to. It's a really elite league. Really a league you want to go play in if you want to play NCAA D1 hockey. Now, one quick thing I want to note here is that most players that are playing in this league were committed either through AAA hockey or prep hockey. They were committed D1 before they went to this league. That being said, if you're not already committed and you do end up making one of the teams in this league, chances are you will get an NCAA D1 commit if you're a regular player night by night. All right, so second on our list is the BCHL. Now I know this one was hard to pick, right? It was really close with third on our list here, that's NAHL, but we put the BC over the NA for several reasons. The first is that most coaches and scouts agree that the level of play and the skill in the BCHL is slightly higher. Now, a lot of people are going to be angry at me and say, hey, the NAHL is just as good, whatever. Now, it's a highly debated topic. I totally get that. But on major consensus from everyone I've talked to, from what I've seen, BCHL versus NAHL, the level play is just slightly higher in the BCHL. So that's one thing for development. And on the NCAA D1 relative commitment side, the BCHL has slightly more than the NAHL as well. So for all those reasons, I rank BCHL second. Overall, the BCHL is a really solid league if your goal is to play NCAA D1 and if you really want to become a very good player in the process. All right, so jumping to the third league on our list, as we already said, the NAHL. All right, we already discussed why we think the NAHL is where it is, and why the BCHL is a little bit higher, in our opinion, than the NAHL. The one thing that I will say that the NAHL does have on the BC is that there's a lot more NCAA D3 relative commits in the NA than from the BC. But one quick caveat here, the reason why is probably because a lot of players from the BCHL end up going to U Sports because it's cheaper than to go to NCAA D3. So that might be one reason, but nevertheless, we can't argue that the NAHL is a great league to play in, to develop, to potentially go NCAA D1, and to ultimately probably go NCAA D3 if NCAA D1 doesn't work out. Now, the fourth league on our list here is often overlooked, but it's actually a very, very strong league, and it's very good for NCAA D1 commitments, and that's the AJHL out in Alberta, Canada. Now, year by year, it's consistently fourth in NCAA D1 relative commitments, and the caliber of play is actually quite high. It's a very physical league, a very skilled league too, and there's very, very good teams in that league that consistently go to the RBC Cup. Brooks Bandits are probably the best example. They're almost always there every year. So a very, very strong league. Now, overall, I would say if your goal is to play NCAA D1 or D3, a good league to go to. One thing to note is that, like the BCHL, not that many NCAA D3 commitments, but the reason being is that a lot of players go to U Sports instead of NCAA 2. But if your goal is to play NCAA D1, D3, or U Sports, definitely a good league to play in for sure. So the next three leagues here are actually really close. It took me and my team a lot of time to figure out which one goes where, but we kind of came up with a list. I know it's going to be highly debated. There's going to be people that disagree, but we're just going to go ahead and say what we think, and we're going to give you the reasons why. So the three leagues are the CCHL, based in the Ottawa region in Canada, the OJHL, based in the Toronto region in Canada, and then the NCDC, based in the New England area in the United States. Now, because these leagues are so close and so similar, I'm going to talk about them as a whole and not individually one by one. So we're going to start with why the CCHL is ranked over the other two leagues. The biggest reason is that the number of relative NCAA D1 commitments is slightly higher in the CCHL compared to the other two leagues. And also, from what we've seen, from what others have seen too, from what a lot of people are agreeing on, and obviously there's going to be different opinions on this, but the caliber of play is just slightly higher in the CCHL compared to the other two leagues. And the biggest thing too, compared to the OJHL, the CCHL is a lot more condensed. So it's got a lot less of a watered down effect. The teams are more well balanced. Compared to the OJHL, there's some really powerhouse teams there on a consistent basis year after year, but it's a little bit more watered down. So that's why the OJHL is kind of below the CCHL in our ranking. So despite being a solid league with good skill, a good level of NCAA D1 commitments, and in a great locations for schools to come see their players, the NCDC kind of has two big drawbacks, which is why they're below the CCHL and the OJHL. The first one being is that only a few select teams consistently hammer out NCAA D1 commitments. The rest of the teams, they're good teams. They send a lot of players NCAA D3, but they don't really get, that many NCAA D1 commitments. Only a few, like the New Jersey Hitmen, for example, really send out those commitments. And then a second reason, and this is probably the biggest reason why, is that a lot of players, unfortunately, think that they're signing for the NCDC team, but unfortunately they end up signing for the USPHL Premier team without really knowing. And this is a highly debated topic. Most coaches, I would say, are clear about which team you're on, but sometimes, in our experience too, it's very unclear. The player thinks they're going to go play NCDC and end up signing in a much lower league. So that's one reason why the NCDC is really, below the CCHL and OJHL. That being said though, the NCDC is still a really good league. if your goal is to try and make it to NCAA D1, but if not, you're okay with NCAA D3, NCDC is a great league to play in. They send out a ton of players to NCAA D3. And these three leagues in general, overall, are solid leagues. They're good skill, good development leagues. They're all very similar, and they're all great places to play. If your goal is to, hopefully maybe play NCAA D1 or even hopefully play U Sports, but if you're okay with settling for NCAA D3 too, if NCAA D1 and U Sports don't work out, I would say that all three of these leagues are great options. Bonus too for the NCDC, it is free to play, unlike the CCHL and the OJHL. So definitely, something to consider if you're financially a bit tight on money. Now, the 8th league on our list is the SJHL out in Saskatchewan, Canada. Now, the reason why this league is ranked lower than the other three that we just mentioned is because you start to see a significant drop down in NCAA D1 commitments. In fact, it's quite rare to get an NCAA D1 commitment out of the SJHL. It's not impossible, but definitely you don't see it happen all too much. It's more geared towards NCAA D3 commitments. There's a decent amount that come out year by year from the SJHL. Some U Sports commitments too. So I would say if your goal is to play, potentially U Sports, maybe even potentially NCAA D1 hockey, but you're okay with NCAA D3, the SJHL is a great league to play in. The caliber of play is solid. It's a very physical league, quite a skilled league too, so definitely a good place to go develop if you're going to get a lot of playing time. Now, the next league on our list is the MJHL out in Manitoba, Canada. Now, the reason why it's below the SJHL, I would say it's just a slight, tier lower than the SJ in almost every facet. So even rare to get an NCAA D1 commit out of the MJHL. A few less NCAA D3 commits, a few less U Sports commits. The caliber of play, very similar, physical, quite skilled, but I would say just a tad, lower. So I would rank it a little bit lower, but overall, another great league to go in if you're trying to develop and get an NCAA D3 commitment. All right, quick note before we move on with our list here. All the leagues that we just mentioned above, if your goal is to play NCAA D3, if you're a regular player in any of these leagues that we mentioned, chances are that you will end up getting an NCAA D3 commitment. Now, the tier of NCAA D3 commit is going to depend on how much you play, what team you play for, what league you play in, all those things. But if your goal is just to play NCAA D3, definitely any of these leagues are a great place to play. So the 10th league on our list here is the EHL in the New England area in the United States. Now, this is actually quite the underrated league, but fun fact, it's actually the highest in terms of relative NCAA D3 commitments per year on quite a year-to-year basis. So it's a really good league. It's really geared towards older players. I would say it's a good league to go to if you can't really find a good fit in any of the other leagues that we previously mentioned. And if your goal is to go NCAA D3 and you find a team in this league that really likes you, that is really going to give you a lot of playing time and promote you. So I would say it's a good league to go to in this case. One thing to watch out for though, certain programs definitely have more NCAA D3 commitments than others. So definitely do your research on this. Talk to hockey experts about this. Really make sure that you're going to a good program that's gonna, give you a ton of playing time and that's gonna help you move on. But overall, a really good league for players who are older and whose goal is to play NCAA D3 hockey. All right, so number 11 on our list is the NOJHL in Northern Ontario in Canada. Now, this league's actually, I would say, from what I've seen, is slightly stronger probably in caliber than the EHL. But the biggest caveat of this league is that it's really in the middle of nowhere versus the EHL is in a great location, right? And the coaches work really hard to promote their guys to go play NCAA D3. Not that the coaches in the NOJHL don't, it's just harder for them because coaches in NCAA just aren't there as much, right? So I would say that's the biggest caveat with the NOJHL, but still a really good developmental league, I would say, for players that want to go there, develop for a year, and maybe, hop to a higher league next year. Or even if their goal is to play NCAA D3, there are a decent amount of NCAA D3 commitments that come out of the NOJHL. So actually not a bad spot to go play in for sure. All right, so the 12th league on our list is the USPHL Premier in the United States. Now, this league actually has the second highest number of relative NCAA D3 commitments per year in the recent years anyways, just behind the EHL. So it's actually not a bad spot to go play in. That being said, there's definitely a couple drawbacks with this league that we're going to mention, and these drawbacks are the reason why it's ranked below the NOJHL. First big drawback, the caliber of play is definitely a good step down from the NOJHL. You know, from the hockey I've seen comparing the two, from what other experts say, you know, it's pretty much a consensus that the caliber of play is definitely a good step down. So your whole overall development and getting ready for NCAA hockey is definitely not as good compared to the NOJHL, I would say. The next biggest drawback is that it's a really big league, which means there is a watered down effect and not all programs are created equal. So it's really important, you know, make sure you do your research and you go to teams that want you, that will make sure that you develop, that play a lot, and teams that really have a good record of advancing players. So it's really important to do your research before you sign with the team. But overall, if your goal is to play NCAA D3 and you can sign with a good program that really wants you, definitely not a bad spot to go play in. I would definitely recommend that in that situation. All right, so the 13th league on our list is the SIJHL. Its location is near Manitoba, but it's actually, you know, a bit in Ontario and a bit in the United States, but it's in that general vicinity. Now, the caliber of the SIJHL is actually quite similar, if not slightly higher than the USPHL Premier, in fact. But the biggest reason why the USPHL Premier is ranked higher than the SI is that the SIJHL has a lot less relative NCAA D3 commitments compared to the USPHL. And we get that the SIJHL is a smaller league, but even if you go down to relative numbers, there's a lot fewer commitments. It resembles more that of the NOJHL. But, you know, if you can't find any other league to play in, you know, and your goal is to still, you know, play junior hockey and potentially get an NCAA D3 commitment, it's still not a bad league to play in. So the 14th league on our list is the NA3HL, which is under the NAHL. This league has a decent number of NCAA D3 commitments, relatively similar to the SIJHL and the NOJHL. But that being said, the caliber of play is definitely a step down. So it's a league that if you're a really good player in this league and you go here and you dominate and you're on a good program that's going to help you advance, then it is possible to play NCAA D3. It's not a bad spot to go, but I would say definitely consider the options and the leagues that we mentioned before coming to this league. I usually say this league's a bit of a last resort to go to if you know, the other leagues don't work out, and if you can find a really good program to play for. Because if you're not in a great program in this league, it's, you know, the chances of going NCAA D3 are quite slim at that point. All right, so there's a few other leagues here that I want to mention that aren't really on our list. And the first set of leagues here are actually leagues that are good caliber hockey, but their commitment towards NCAA isn't great. They have other priorities, let's say. So the first one is the MJAHL, that's the Maritimes Hockey League in the Maritimes in Canada. And next is the QJAAHL, and that one is in Quebec. So these two leagues, again, good caliber hockey, but they're not really focused on advancing players to NCAA. It's actually quite rare out of these leagues. And the next leagues that I'm about to mention are the ones where the caliber isn't quite great and the advancement to NCAA D3 hockey isn't that great either. Personally, I advise my clients and pretty much every player to avoid these leagues if they can. You know, I'm probably gonna get a little bit of heat for this because it is a bit debated, but I would say definitely not really the leagues you want to go to. The first one is the WSHL, or the Western States Hockey League. There is one exception here. Some teams, like there's a few select teams in that league that are powerhouses and that do send a decent amount of players NCAA D3, so it's something, you know, worth considering maybe, but I would consider the other leagues before this one anyways. Next is the USPHL Elite, the EHL Premier, and then the GMHL. I would say these four leagues, probably best to avoid and to consider other options. All right, so that's it for our list. I know it was a really long video, but we really felt it was really important to send this info out so players and parents can just make better decisions as to where they play. The full list will actually be available in the description below. So if you don't want to watch this whole video again or whatever, you can just look at the description and kind of use it as a guide as you're moving forward. All right, so before we kind of wrap it up here, just a reminder to smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and share this video if you liked it. We feel like it would really help a lot of people, and the more it gets shared, the more people can view it. If you want to reach out to us, feel free to comment down below or send us an email at info@AJHL. The link's in the description below. And if you want to check out any of our other platforms, there's a link in the description below that pretty much gives you access to our website, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, all that fun stuff. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you on that next one.